The first shock in the land of cold. Have you ever wondered why you try so hard yet still feel lost, as if life is testing your limits? If you've ever wanted to give up when everything around you felt too cold and unfamiliar, today's story might be the answer you need, because sometimes the place that makes us the most uncomfortable is the very place that teaches us how to become stronger. Today's video shares my journey of leaving a warm country to start a new life in the United States, where the climate, culture, people, and lifestyle felt completely different from everything I knew. If you're searching for healing motivation, trying to grow personally in a new environment, or struggling with feeling disconnected abroad, then this story, From a Warm Country to a Cold Life in the U.S. What if discomfort is your teacher? May help you realize something powerful: understanding heals. The first day I landed in the Midwest of the United States, the temperature outside was 10 degrees below 0 Celsius. The cold didn't just hit my skin, it felt like it slipped straight into my thoughts. I came from a place where evenings were warm enough for people to sit outside and talk without needing jackets. Here, stepping outdoors for even a few minutes felt like punishment. But weather wasn't the only shock. The real shock was emotional. Suddenly, I realized I was no longer surrounded by familiar things. No family dinners, no close friends, no familiar streets, no comforting language floating around me. Just me, one suitcase, and a dream that suddenly felt fragile. Many people think moving to America means instant opportunity. And yes, opportunity exists. But what few people talk about is the loneliness that often comes with it. According to the American Psychological Association, people moving to colder climates often experience something called seasonal affective disorder, a form of seasonal depression. During long winters, sunlight decreases, serotonin production drops, and people may feel low energy, sadness, and loss of motivation. I didn't know this at the time. I just thought something was wrong with me. My first winter morning, I woke up at 7 a.m. Yet outside it was still completely dark. By the time work ended around 5 p.m., darkness had already returned. Entire days passed without real sunlight. My brain seemed confused. I slept more, yet felt exhausted. I ate more, yet lacked energy. Doubt slowly entered my mind. One evening, while waiting for a bus in freezing wind, I remember asking myself, why did I come here? Why didn't I stay somewhere easier? That moment forced me to realize something important. America wasn't making me miserable. Massive change was. The human brain loves familiarity. It's a survival mechanism. When everything becomes unfamiliar, language, food, social habits, climate, political conversations, daily routines, the brain treats it as potential danger and activates stress responses. So the urge to give up isn't because you're weak. It's because your nervous system is trying to protect you. Understanding this changed everything for me. Instead of blaming myself for not being strong enough, I began learning how to adapt step by step. I bought a daylight lamp for my room because research shows artificial daylight can help reduce winter depression symptoms. I forced myself to walk outside, even just 10 minutes a day, to boost endorphins. I cooked familiar food so my mind felt less displaced. Most importantly, I allowed myself to feel vulnerable without shame. Because the truth is, when you step outside your comfort zone, you will feel small. But feeling small creates room for growth. I remember returning to the tiny shared apartment I rented with strangers, sitting quietly on my bed, realizing life here wouldn't be easy. But if I survived my first American winter, maybe I could survive anything. And slowly, a new thought formed. Maybe life wasn't being cruel. Maybe it was training me. Sometimes life isn't cold toward you. Sometimes it's teaching you how to build your own warmth. And here's the strange but comforting truth. Discomfort is often the beginning of personal transformation. Neuroscience research shows that when humans face new challenges, the brain forms new neural pathways. In simple terms, struggle literally helps you grow mentally stronger. Looking back now, that freezing winter became one of the most important teachers of my life. It forced me to become independent, emotionally stronger, and more self-aware. It pushed me to seek connection, learn communication skills, and understand people from cultures completely different from mine. Most importantly, it taught me empathy, because once you know how loneliness feels, you recognize it in others. So if you're watching this while feeling stuck, exhausted, or unsure about your path in America or anywhere else, remember this. Adaptation takes time. Healing takes patience. Growth often hides inside discomfort. In the end, fear isn't your enemy. It's simply your nervous system learning how to survive in a brand new world. And sometimes, that scared version of you is actually the beginning of the strongest version you'll ever become. Lonely in a crowded country. Have you ever walked through a crowd where everyone seemed busy, connected, moving somewhere important, and yet you felt completely invisible? That was exactly how my second month in the United States felt. America is loud, fast, and full of people, but loneliness can still sneak in quietly, especially when you're new, far from home, and trying to rebuild your life from zero. After surviving the first shock of winter, I assumed things would get easier. I thought once I started working regularly and learning daily routines, life would begin to feel normal. Instead, a new challenge appeared, loneliness in the middle of constant movement. In my home country, people talk easily with neighbors. Friends drop by unexpectedly. Family members check on you without scheduling weeks in advance. Social life happens naturally. But in many parts of the U.S., especially cities, people respect personal space so much that connection often requires planning. Everyone seems busy with work, schedules, responsibilities, and personal goals. At first, I misunderstood this distance. I thought people didn't like me. Coworkers smiled politely but rarely invited me out. Neighbors waved but closed their doors quickly. Conversations stayed friendly but short. After work, everyone disappeared into their own lives. I would return to my small apartment, heat leftovers, scroll through my phone, and see photos from home, birthday parties, family dinners, friends laughing together. And suddenly, the distance between my old life and my new one felt enormous. Psychologists in the U.S. often call this experience cultural loneliness. Even when surrounded by people, immigrants and newcomers frequently feel emotionally disconnected because familiar social cues are missing. Humor feels different. Conversations move differently. Even small things like how people greet each other change. Research from Harvard's study of adult development, one of the longest-running studies on happiness, shows that strong relationships are the #1 predictor of long-term well-being. Not money. Not success. Not status. Relationships. And suddenly, I realized something painful. I had moved thousands of miles away from the very thing humans need most, connection. The loneliness became stronger during simple moments. Grocery shopping alone. Watching snow fall outside my window. Eating dinner without conversation. Weekends stretched endlessly. Time zones made calling home difficult, and I didn't want my family to worry, so I often pretended everything was fine. One Saturday night, I walked through downtown streets full of restaurants and bars. People laughed with friends, couples held hands, groups celebrated birthdays. Yet I felt like a ghost passing through someone else's life. That night, I nearly booked a ticket home. But something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe a small voice saying, "Give it more time." So instead of escaping, I started observing. I noticed Americans weren't unfriendly. They were simply cautious about personal boundaries. Friendships often develop slowly, especially among adults balancing busy lives. Invitations are planned. Trust builds gradually. Sociologists explain that American culture values independence strongly. People are encouraged to manage their own lives early. So social connections sometimes require more intention than in collectivist cultures where community happens automatically. Understanding this changed how I approached people. Instead of waiting for invitations, I began initiating conversations. I joined a local community class. I started talking more with coworkers during breaks. I volunteered at small community events. At first, interactions felt awkward, like learning to walk again socially. But slowly, familiar faces appeared. One coworker invited me for coffee. A neighbor started chatting longer in the hallway. Small conversations grew into friendly routines. And science supports this approach. Studies on loneliness show that even minor social interactions, like chatting with a cashier or greeting neighbors, significantly improve mood and reduce feelings of isolation. Humans don't always need deep conversations. Sometimes small connections are enough to remind us we belong somewhere. Still, loneliness didn't disappear overnight. Some evenings were heavy. Some holidays hurt. Some days I questioned whether I truly fit into this new world. But I began learning an important lesson. Connection in a new country doesn't happen automatically. It must be built intentionally. I also discovered something surprising. Many Americans feel lonely too. Coworkers admitted they struggled to make friends after moving cities. Neighbors shared stories of isolation during career changes. Loneliness wasn't just an immigrant problem, it was a modern life problem. That realization comforted me. I wasn't broken. I was simply human. Looking back now, I understand that loneliness became a teacher. It pushed me to develop communication skills, emotional resilience, and empathy. It taught me to reach out instead of waiting. It reminded me how valuable connection truly is. So if you're living in America or planning to move and suddenly feel alone despite being surrounded by people, remember this. Loneliness is often temporary, but the strength you build from overcoming it lasts much longer. Sometimes, the crowd isn't ignoring you. Sometimes, they're just waiting for you to step forward. Because in the end, connection doesn't always find us first. Sometimes, we have to walk toward it. And strangely enough, the moment you stop hiding from loneliness is often the moment you begin finding your place. When climate shapes your mind. Imagine waking up every day feeling tired for no clear reason. You slept enough, you ate normally, nothing terrible happened, yet motivation disappears, your mood feels heavy, and even simple tasks seem harder. Now imagine this happening for months, and you begin to wonder if something inside you is broken. That was my third major lesson living in the United States. Climate doesn't just affect your body, it quietly shapes your mind. After the initial shock of arriving and the loneliness that followed, I thought I was slowly adapting to American life. I found work, learned transportation routes, and even started making a few acquaintances. But as winter deepened, something unexpected began happening inside me. My energy dropped again, but this time it felt deeper than homesickness. It felt biological. The days grew shorter, and sunlight almost disappeared from my routine. I left home in darkness and returned in darkness. Sometimes entire weeks passed without seeing clear sunshine. Snow piled outside, streets emptied earlier, and life moved indoors. Without realizing it, my mood followed the weather. At first, I blamed stress. Then work pressure. Then language barriers. But nothing fully explained why even small tasks felt exhausting. One evening, I stayed home scrolling online and accidentally found an article discussing winter depression in the United States. Doctors call it seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Millions of people across North America experience mood changes when seasons shift, especially during long winters. The science surprised me. When sunlight decreases, our bodies produce less serotonin, a chemical connected to happiness and emotional balance. At the same time, melatonin production changes, affecting sleep cycles. In simple terms, less sunlight can make you feel sad and tired even if your life circumstances are fine. Suddenly, everything made sense. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't weak. My brain was reacting to environmental change. Immigrants from warm countries are especially vulnerable because our bodies are not used to long periods without sunlight. Back home, sunshine was normal. Here, winter sometimes felt endless. This realization changed how I saw my struggles. Instead of fighting my emotions, I started learning how to support my mental health. Research from American mental health organizations shows several small lifestyle adjustments can significantly improve winter mood. So I began experimenting. First, I forced myself outside daily, even in cold weather. Just 10 or 15 minutes of daylight exposure helps regulate circadian rhythms and boost mood chemicals. At first, it felt pointless, walking in freezing air. But after a week, I noticed slight improvement. Second, I started exercising indoors. Nothing intense, simple stretching or light workouts at home. Exercise releases endorphins, natural mood elevators. Science shows regular movement reduces depression symptoms, even when motivation is low. Third, I adjusted my diet. Winter cravings pushed me toward heavy comfort food, but balanced meals stabilized my energy better. Nutrition experts note that vitamin deficiencies, especially vitamin D during winter, can worsen mood problems. So I began paying attention to what I ate. And perhaps most importantly, I stopped isolating myself completely. Winter encourages staying indoors alone, but psychologists warn that isolation worsens seasonal depression. So even when I didn't feel social, I tried to meet coworkers occasionally or simply work in public spaces instead of my room. Still, there were difficult days. Some mornings felt heavy for no reason. Some evenings loneliness returned. Healing wasn't instant. One particular night, after a long snowy day, I sat by my apartment window watching streetlights glow against falling snow. Everything felt quiet and distant. I wondered again if I belonged here. But then another thought appeared. Maybe this season was teaching patience. Back home, life felt easier because conditions supported comfort. Here, survival required adaptation. Americans often joke that winter builds character, and for the first time, I understood why. Climate forces people to become resilient. You learn preparation, discipline, and emotional endurance. You learn that motivation cannot always depend on comfort. Psychologists studying resilience often say growth happens when people learn to function despite discomfort. And winter in America offers plenty of discomfort. Looking back now, that period reshaped my mindset. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, I began taking action first and letting motivation follow. Instead of blaming circumstances, I started adjusting habits. And slowly, winter ended. The first warm day felt like emotional rebirth. Parks filled again. People smiled more. Energy returned naturally. And I realized something important. The darkness had passed, just as difficult seasons in life eventually pass too. So if you're living in a cold place right now, feeling tired, unmotivated, or emotionally low, understand this: sometimes it isn't your fault. Sometimes your environment is affecting you more than you realize. And once you understand the cause, you can begin healing intentionally. Because in the end, the weather outside may be freezing, but resilience grows quietly inside you. And often, the mind just needs a little sunlight and a little patience to remember how to feel alive again. Love across cultural climates. Two people can love each other deeply and still feel misunderstood, simply because they learned different emotional rules growing up. Living in the United States didn't just challenge my career path or identity, it also reshaped how I understood love, partnership, and conflict. Moving across cultures doesn't only change your environment, it changes how relationships work. And sometimes love becomes the classroom where the hardest lessons happen. After months of adapting to winter, loneliness, and American work culture, life finally started to feel manageable. My English improved, routines became familiar, and daily survival required less energy. That was when romance quietly entered my life, bringing comfort at first, and then unexpected challenges. Meeting someone special while living abroad feels intense. When everything else is unfamiliar, emotional connection becomes your safe place. Conversations felt natural, laughter came easily, and being together softened the stress of immigration life. For a while, love made America feel less cold. But cultural differences often hide beneath the surface until everyday realities expose them. In the culture I grew up in, relationships often move toward commitment quickly. Family involvement is common, emotional closeness is expected, and partners communicate frequently throughout the day. In contrast, many Americans grow up valuing independence strongly. Personal space matters. Emotional expression may be more reserved, and relationships often develop gradually. At first, these differences seemed harmless. But slowly, misunderstandings appeared. For example, regular texting and checking in felt normal to me. It meant care and attention. But my partner sometimes focused on work or personal activities without constant communication, seeing it as healthy independence. To them, silence meant comfort. To me, silence sometimes felt like emotional distance. Neither of us was wrong. We simply learned love differently. Psychologists studying intercultural relationships explain that expectations about romance are shaped by childhood environment, media influence, and social traditions. When two people come from different cultural backgrounds, conflict often emerges not because love is missing, but because expectations are mismatched. Tension grew gradually. Small disagreements over communication, time management, and family involvement sometimes turned into bigger emotional conflicts. Meanwhile, immigration stress, financial pressure, and adaptation struggles added hidden weight to our interactions. Research in cross-cultural psychology shows that couples dealing with relocation stress often experience increased emotional conflict. When people feel insecure about work, identity, or belonging, emotional reactions become stronger at home. Some arguments weren't really about the relationship at all. They were about exhaustion disguised as frustration. One winter evening, after a disagreement, I went outside to clear my mind. Snow fell quietly, and the cold air helped calm my racing thoughts. A difficult question surfaced: was loving across cultures simply too complicated? Part of me considered whether life would be easier with someone from my own background, someone who naturally understood my habits and expectations. But another realization slowly formed. Maybe discomfort wasn't proof of incompatibility. Maybe it was proof that growth was happening. Instead of giving up, we decided to learn. We began talking openly about our expectations. I explained how family closeness shaped my idea of partnership. My partner explained how independence shaped theirs. We read about intercultural communication and relationship psychology. We practiced expressing feelings without blaming each other. Scientific studies on successful long-term relationships show that couples who listen actively and remain curious about each other's experiences manage conflict better than those focused on proving themselves right. Small improvements followed. I learned not to panic when messages weren't answered immediately. My partner learned to communicate plans more clearly. Instead of assuming the worst, we asked questions. Instead of arguing to win, we argued to understand. Still, progress wasn't perfect. Misunderstandings still happened. Some days felt emotionally exhausting. But gradually, respect replaced confusion. One surprising lesson came from observing American couples around us. Many openly discuss therapy or relationship counseling, something less common or sometimes stigmatized in other cultures. In the U.S., seeking mental health support is increasingly seen as strength rather than weakness. So we tried counseling sessions. Not because the relationship was broken, but because we wanted tools to communicate better. Those conversations revealed something important. Successful relationships aren't about finding someone identical. They're about learning how to navigate differences with empathy. Looking back, loving across cultures forced me to grow emotionally. It taught patience, listening, and flexibility. It showed how assumptions create distance while curiosity builds connection. And perhaps most importantly, it taught me that conflict doesn't always signal the end of love. Sometimes conflict is simply an invitation to understand each other more deeply. So if you are in a relationship shaped by cultural differences, remember this: confusion doesn't automatically mean incompatibility. Often, it simply means two people are learning each other's emotional language. Because love isn't about avoiding emotional storms. It's about learning how to stay warm together when emotional climates change. And sometimes, the relationship that challenges you most becomes the one that helps you grow the most. Immigration pressure and survival mode. Nobody really explains how exhausting immigration paperwork feels until you live through it yourself. People often talk about chasing the American dream, building careers in the United States, or finding better opportunities. But very few mention the emotional weight of visas, legal rules, job uncertainty, and constant fear of making one small mistake that could change everything. My fifth lesson in America wasn't about weather or culture, it was about survival inside a system that never stops moving. By this time, I had survived climate shock, loneliness, and relationship adjustments. Life slowly felt more stable. But then reality hit in a different way. Immigration rules and legal responsibilities quietly controlled almost every major decision in my life. In the United States, your visa status often decides where you can work, how long you can stay, and sometimes even whether you can change jobs. Back home, career decisions depended mostly on personal choice or opportunity. Here, legal paperwork sometimes felt more powerful than personal ambition. At work, coworkers talked about switching companies for better salaries or moving to different cities for new opportunities. Meanwhile, I often had to ask a different question: am I even allowed to do that? That limitation creates invisible stress. You begin calculating every move carefully. Losing a job isn't just losing income, it can mean losing legal status. Changing careers isn't simple, it may require new paperwork, approvals, or long waiting periods. Psychologists describe this state as chronic uncertainty stress, where people live under continuous low-level anxiety because important parts of life feel unstable. Research shows that uncertainty activates the brain's stress response similar to physical danger, especially when the future feels unpredictable. And immigration life is full of uncertainty. I remember refreshing email inboxes, waiting for visa updates, work authorizations, or legal confirmations. Weeks sometimes passed with no news. During those waiting periods, it felt impossible to relax fully. Sleep became lighter. Thoughts ran constantly. What if documents were delayed? What if something was rejected? What if plans suddenly collapsed? Even small mistakes suddenly felt dangerous. Forgetting to submit one document on time, misunderstanding regulations, or missing an appointment could create serious consequences. At the same time, financial pressure added another layer. Starting life in America isn't cheap. Rent, transportation, healthcare, insurance, and daily expenses accumulate quickly. Many immigrants send money home while trying to build savings abroad. Sociological studies in the United States show that immigrants often work longer hours initially, trying to stabilize finances while also adapting culturally. That combination creates burnout risk. I remember weeks when I worked overtime while also attending immigration appointments, filling paperwork at night, and trying to maintain relationships. Exhaustion quietly accumulated. One evening, after reviewing yet another stack of documents, I felt overwhelmed. For a moment, the dream that brought me here seemed buried under bureaucracy. A question surfaced again: was this struggle really worth it? But something unexpected happened soon after. A coworker, also an immigrant, shared their story. They described similar fears, similar paperwork battles, similar sleepless nights. Listening to them, I realized something comforting: I wasn't alone in this journey. Millions of people navigate American immigration systems every year, slowly building new lives despite the complexity. And many eventually succeed. That conversation changed my mindset. Instead of seeing paperwork as an enemy, I began viewing it as part of the path. Difficult, yes, but temporary. Immigration processes take time, but they also create resilience. You learn patience, organization, and persistence. Science supports this perspective. Psychological studies show that people who frame challenges as temporary obstacles rather than permanent barriers cope better with long-term stress. Perspective doesn't remove difficulty, but it reduces emotional suffering. So I adjusted my approach. I organized documents carefully. I scheduled reminders for deadlines. I asked experienced friends for advice. Instead of panicking, I prepared step by step. Small actions restored a sense of control. At the same time, I reminded myself why I came: growth, opportunity, learning, and building a future. Slowly, survival mode transformed into strategy mode. Looking back now, immigration pressure became one of my greatest teachers. It forced responsibility, long-term planning, and mental strength. It showed me how much uncertainty humans can handle when motivated by hope. And surprisingly, it also increased empathy. After experiencing these struggles, I understand why newcomers sometimes seem stressed or cautious. Behind every immigration story, there are invisible battles people rarely share. So if you're currently navigating visa challenges, job uncertainty, or legal stress while living in America, remember this. Feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're handling something difficult. Because in the end, immigration isn't just about crossing borders. It's about crossing emotional limits you never knew you could survive. And often, the pressure that feels unbearable today becomes the strength you rely on tomorrow. Marriage between two worlds. Marriage sounds romantic when people imagine it from the outside, two people choosing each other, building a future, sharing dreams. But when marriage connects two cultures, two families, and two entirely different life experiences, love becomes only one part of the equation. Living in the United States taught me that marriage across cultures is less about fairy tales and more about learning how to build a bridge between two worlds without losing yourself in the process. By the time marriage entered my story, my partner and I had already survived cultural misunderstandings, immigration stress, and adaptation challenges. We loved each other deeply, but we soon discovered that marriage adds another layer of reality. Especially when families from different backgrounds become involved. In my home culture, marriage often connects entire families, not just two individuals. Parents expect involvement, relatives offer opinions, and traditions guide many decisions. Weddings are community events, and family approval matters deeply. In contrast, many American families prioritize independence. Couples often make decisions privately. Parents may offer support, but involvement is usually less direct. Individual happiness tends to come first. At first, we underestimated how these differences would affect us. Simple decisions became complicated. Where should we live? How often should we visit family? How involved should parents be in our decisions? Even holiday traditions created tension. My family expected long visits and celebrations, while my partner preferred quieter, shorter gatherings. None of these issues seemed huge alone, but together they created emotional friction. Psychologists call this family culture collision, a common challenge in intercultural marriages. Each partner carries expectations shaped by childhood experiences, and when those expectations clash, frustration appears. I remember one argument that started over something small, holiday travel plans. But beneath that argument hid deeper fears. I worried about losing connection with my roots. My partner worried about losing personal freedom and comfort. Stress from work and immigration processes added pressure. Studies on marriage adjustment show that couples dealing with relocation or career uncertainty often experience higher conflict levels because emotional energy is already low. At one point, conversations turned into debates instead of understanding. We tried convincing each other instead of listening. One evening, after another disagreement, we sat silently in our apartment. Outside, snow covered the streets again. Inside, emotional distance felt colder than winter. A difficult realization appeared. love doesn't automatically solve cultural conflict. But neither of us wanted to give up. So we decided to change strategy. Instead of arguing about who was right, we started asking why certain things mattered. I explained how family closeness shaped my sense of belonging. My partner explained how independence shaped theirs. Gradually, we saw that both perspectives were valid, just different. Science supports this shift. Relationship researchers, including studies from the Gottman Institute in the U.S., show that successful couples don't eliminate differences, they learn how to manage them respectfully. So we experimented with compromise. Some holidays we traveled to my family. Other times we stayed local and created our own traditions. Video calls helped bridge distance. Boundaries were gently established so families felt included without controlling our choices. Another challenge emerged around gender roles and responsibilities. Cultural expectations sometimes influenced how we saw household duties or career priorities. Open conversations helped redefine roles based on fairness instead of tradition. At one point, we even considered counseling. In American culture, relationship counseling is increasingly normal, seen as maintenance rather than crisis response. Those sessions gave us tools for communication, listening without interruption, expressing needs clearly, and avoiding blame. Slowly, marriage shifted from conflict management to partnership building. We learned something powerful: marriage between cultures works not because differences disappear, but because respect grows stronger than disagreement. There were still difficult moments. Cultural habits don't change overnight. Sometimes frustration returned. But now we recognized patterns faster and resolved issues more calmly. One evening, while cooking together, blending recipes from both cultures, I realized how symbolic our marriage had become. Two cuisines mixing, two histories connecting, two futures aligning. Living in the United States allowed us to create something new, not fully one culture or the other, but a shared space where both belonged. Looking back now, marriage taught me patience in ways nothing else could. It showed me how empathy requires effort. It revealed how love becomes stronger when both people are willing to adapt. And perhaps the biggest lesson was this: home is not just a place. It's something two people build together. So if you're navigating marriage across cultures, feeling confused or overwhelmed by differences, remember this: conflict doesn't mean failure. Often, it simply means two worlds are learning how to live under one roof. Because in the end, successful marriage isn't about choosing one culture over another. It's about choosing each other every day while creating something entirely new. And sometimes, the most beautiful homes are built where two worlds meet instead of collide. The moment I almost gave up. There comes a point in many immigrant journeys when exhaustion becomes heavier than hope. Not dramatic exhaustion, not the kind people post online, but the quiet kind, when you keep functioning, going to work, paying bills, smiling politely, yet inside you feel empty. My seventh lesson in America arrived during that silent phase, the moment when I almost packed everything and went home. By then, several years had passed since I first landed in the United States. I had survived winter depression, loneliness, immigration paperwork, cultural misunderstandings, and the challenges of marriage across backgrounds. From the outside, life looked stable. Job secured. Marriage functioning. Daily routine established. But stability doesn't always mean happiness. Stress accumulates quietly. Immigration processes take time. Career growth feels slow when you're rebuilding from scratch in another country. Cultural adaptation requires constant mental effort. And sometimes, the dream that motivated you at the beginning starts feeling distant. One particular period felt especially heavy. Work responsibilities increased, visa renewal created uncertainty again, and family back home faced personal challenges I couldn't physically support. Time zone differences made conversations short and emotional. Guilt appeared, guilt for leaving, guilt for not being present enough, guilt for choosing my own future. Psychologists describe this emotional state as immigrant guilt. A common experience where people feel torn between opportunities abroad and responsibilities toward family at home. Research shows this guilt can increase anxiety and emotional burnout. At the same time, my relationship faced normal life stress. Nothing dramatic, just everyday fatigue. Two tired people trying to solve practical problems after long workdays. Romance sometimes gets replaced by logistics, bills, schedules, responsibilities. One night, after a long shift and another stressful phone call about paperwork delays, I sat alone in my car outside our apartment. Snow covered everything again, just like my first winter. And suddenly, a thought surfaced clearly. What if I just go back? For the first time, returning home felt not like failure but relief. Familiar language, familiar culture, family support, warm weather, simpler life. No visa concerns. No cultural misunderstandings. No constant adaptation. The idea felt comforting. And that scared me. Because part of me knew I wasn't just tired of America. I was tired in general. Exhaustion had blurred my perspective. Scientific research on decision-making shows that chronic stress reduces mental clarity. When people feel overwhelmed, the brain naturally seeks escape options rather than long-term solutions. In survival mode, comfort feels more important than growth. Sitting in that car, I almost convinced myself leaving was the smartest decision. But then something small happened. I looked at my phone gallery and saw photos from my first months in America. Pictures of my tiny rented room. My first snow. My first job badge. Nervous smiles. Early struggles. I remembered how scared yet determined I once felt. And another question appeared, if I leave now, will I regret not staying longer? That question shifted everything. Because deep down, I knew something important. I wasn't running toward home. I was running away from temporary exhaustion. So instead of booking a ticket, I made a different decision. I allowed myself to rest. Psychologists emphasize that burnout often requires recovery, not escape. Chronic stress accumulates when people push themselves without recovery periods. Sometimes, the solution isn't changing countries or careers, it's allowing emotional space to heal. I took a few days off work. I spoke honestly with my partner about how overwhelmed I felt. We planned small breaks instead of big life changes. I limited stressful news and focused on daily routines again. And slowly, emotional clarity returned. Problems didn't disappear. Visa processes still moved slowly. Work still demanded effort. Life remained imperfect. But my perspective changed. I remembered why I started this journey: growth, opportunity, curiosity about the world beyond my comfort zone. And those reasons still mattered. Looking back now, that near breaking point became one of the most important lessons of my American life. It taught me the difference between needing change and needing rest. Immigrant life, personal growth, and healing journeys are not straight lines. Motivation rises and falls. Some seasons feel empowering, others feel draining. And sometimes, strength doesn't mean pushing harder. Sometimes, strength means pausing long enough to breathe. So if you're watching this feeling exhausted, questioning your path in America or anywhere else, remember this. Wanting to quit doesn't automatically mean you're on the wrong road. Sometimes it simply means you've been strong for too long without recovery. Because in the end, giving up and taking a break look similar from the outside, but only one allows you to continue later with clearer vision. And often, the moment you almost quit becomes the moment you rediscover why you started. Discomfort became my teacher. Comfort feels safe, predictable, and easy to love. Discomfort feels like a mistake, something to escape as quickly as possible. Yet my life in the United States slowly taught me a lesson I resisted for years. The moments that hurt the most often shape us the most. The 8th chapter of my journey began when I finally stopped asking why life felt hard and started asking what those hardships were trying to teach me. After the period when I nearly gave up and considered returning home, something inside me shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. Instead of waiting for everything to become comfortable, I began noticing how much I had already changed because of discomfort. When I first arrived, simple things scared me. Speaking English in public felt stressful. Navigating public transportation confused me. Job interviews terrified me. Even ordering food sometimes felt awkward. Now, those things felt normal. Neuroscience explains why this transformation happens. The brain constantly adapts to repeated experiences through a process called neuroplasticity. When we face unfamiliar situations repeatedly, new neural pathways develop, making challenges easier over time. In simple terms, discomfort trains the brain. Looking back, every difficult phase had secretly prepared me for the next one. Loneliness taught independence. Winter depression taught emotional care. Immigration paperwork taught patience and organization. Relationship conflicts taught communication and empathy. At the time, each struggle felt like punishment. Later, each one revealed itself as training. One memory stands out clearly. During one particularly stressful week at work, I handled a complicated situation that earlier in my American life would have completely overwhelmed me. Instead, I stayed calm, solved the problem, and moved forward. On the way home, realization hit. The old version of me wouldn't have managed this. Psychologists studying resilience explain that humans develop mental strength when exposed to manageable stress over time. Too little challenge prevents growth, too much breaks people. But balanced hardship builds adaptability. In other words, discomfort is often the gym where emotional muscles grow. Yet modern life encourages the opposite. Social media shows comfortable success stories, making struggle look like failure. Many people assume successful immigrants or professionals adapted easily. The truth is rarely that simple. One evening, while talking to a friend who recently moved to the U.S., they confessed feeling miserable and doubting their decision. Listening to them felt like hearing my past self. And for the first time, I realized how far I had come. Instead of offering unrealistic motivation, I told them something honest. Discomfort doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It often means you're learning. Science supports this perspective. Behavioral psychology shows that growth happens outside comfort zones because the brain pays more attention during challenging experiences, strengthening learning and memory formation. So instead of resisting discomfort, I began working with it. When conversations felt awkward, I practiced more communication. When work tasks seemed intimidating, I treated them as skill-building opportunities. When cultural differences created confusion, I asked questions instead of withdrawing. Small changes in mindset created big emotional shifts. Discomfort stopped being an enemy and became a signal. Something new is happening here. This didn't mean life suddenly became easy. Stressful days still appeared. Immigration challenges continued. Relationships still required effort. But now, difficulties felt temporary rather than permanent. Another important change involved comparison. Earlier, I compared my progress with others constantly. Some immigrants seemed successful quickly. Others advanced faster in careers or relationships. Comparison created frustration. Later, I understood that every immigrant journey moves at a different speed. Growth cannot be rushed. Progress that feels slow still counts. Researchers studying long-term motivation confirm that focusing on personal progress rather than social comparison improves mental well-being and persistence. A surprising lesson also emerged. Discomfort increases empathy. Experiencing struggle personally makes it easier to understand others' difficulties. I became more patient with newcomers, more understanding toward coworkers, and kinder to people navigating their own challenges. And gradually, gratitude appeared where frustration once lived. Gratitude for opportunities one once took for granted. Gratitude for personal growth that comfort alone could never provide. Gratitude for discovering strengths I didn't know existed. Looking back now, I see discomfort as one of my greatest teachers in America. Without winter, loneliness, immigration stress, or relationship conflicts, I might have remained emotionally unchanged. Growth rarely happens in comfort zones. So if you're watching this while feeling uncomfortable in your new job, new country, or new stage of life, remember this. Discomfort is often temporary, but the strength you build lasts much longer. Because in the end, challenges aren't always obstacles blocking your path. Sometimes they are the path. And often, the very experiences you wish would disappear become the ones that transform you the most. What science taught me about healing and starting again. Healing did not arrive in my life as a sudden breakthrough or a single inspiring moment. It appeared slowly, almost invisibly, through small realizations, daily habits, and a growing understanding of how the human mind actually recovers from stress and emotional exhaustion. After years of struggling with loneliness, immigration pressure, cultural adjustment, and relationship conflicts, I finally began asking a different question. How do people truly heal after prolonged stress? My search for answers led me toward psychology and neuroscience, and surprisingly, scientific research began explaining experiences I thought were personal failures. Instead, they were normal human responses to long-term adaptation and uncertainty. One important discovery was understanding how chronic stress affects the brain. Scientists explained that when people live in constant uncertainty, like immigrants adjusting to a new country, the body produces stress hormones for extended periods. Over time, this can reduce motivation, disturb sleep, and increase anxiety or sadness. In other words, many emotional struggles immigrants face are biological responses, not personal weaknesses. Learning this changed how I treated myself. Instead of blaming myself for feeling exhausted or unmotivated, I began focusing on recovery practices supported by research. Sleep, for example, became a priority. Studies from American universities show that quality sleep allows the brain to process emotions and reset stress levels. Yet during my hardest years, sleep was often irregular due to work pressure and emotional worries. When I started improving my sleep routine, reducing late-night phone use and maintaining consistent sleep hours, my mood slowly improved. Problems didn't disappear, but my ability to handle them strengthened. Exercise was another scientifically proven tool. At first, I avoided it because I felt too tired after work. But research consistently shows that even light physical activity releases endorphins, chemicals that naturally reduce stress and improve mood. So I started small. Short evening walks. Weekend park visits. Simple stretching at home. These minor habits created noticeable emotional benefits within weeks. Nutrition also played an unexpected role. Scientists increasingly connect diet with mental health, explaining how gut health influences emotional stability. Eating irregularly or relying on fast food during stressful periods worsened my mood without me realizing it. Gradually, cooking healthier meals at home became part of my healing routine. It wasn't about perfection, it was about consistency. Yet physical habits alone were not enough. Emotional healing required understanding thought patterns. Cognitive psychology teaches that the brain often exaggerates negative experiences during stressful phases. When challenges pile up, people begin thinking everything is going wrong, even when positive aspects still exist. I recognized this pattern in myself. One difficult workday made me think my entire career was failing. One argument felt like relationship collapse. One immigration problem seemed like permanent disaster. Therapists call this cognitive distortion. Learning to challenge these thoughts became transformative. Instead of believing every negative emotion, I started asking, is this problem permanent or temporary? Is this situation truly hopeless or simply difficult right now? Often, the answer revealed temporary difficulty rather than permanent failure. Another important scientific concept I learned is resilience building. Psychologists explain that resilience isn't something people are born with, it develops through repeated recovery after setbacks. Each time I survived loneliness, adapted to cultural confusion, or solved bureaucratic problems, resilience grew quietly. The process felt painful in the moment but created long-term strength. Social connection also proved essential. Studies repeatedly confirm that supportive relationships dramatically improve emotional recovery. Yet immigrants often isolate themselves while trying to adapt. I made conscious efforts to reconnect with friends, call family more often, and spend meaningful time with my partner. Conversations didn't eliminate problems, but they made burdens feel lighter. Mindfulness and meditation, once ideas I ignored, also became useful tools. Neuroscientists show that mindfulness practices reduce stress by calming brain regions responsible for fear and anxiety. At first, sitting quietly felt uncomfortable. My mind raced constantly. But after weeks of brief daily practice, mental clarity improved. Emotional reactions slowed down, allowing more thoughtful responses instead of impulsive stress responses. Perhaps the most powerful scientific insight involved self-compassion. Research shows people recover faster when they treat themselves kindly during failures rather than criticizing themselves harshly. For years, I believed strict self-criticism would force improvement. Instead, it created exhaustion. Learning to speak to myself with patience and understanding changed everything. Mistakes became learning experiences instead of proof of failure. Gradually, life began feeling manageable again. Not perfect, not easy, but stable. Healing, I realized, is not about eliminating challenges. It's about building habits and mental tools that help navigate difficulties without losing hope. Looking back, understanding the science behind recovery helped me forgive my past struggles. Those years of confusion and sadness were not wasted time. They were part of a necessary adjustment process. And if someone watching this now feels emotionally drained while adjusting to life in a new country or facing personal hardships, remember something important: healing rarely happens overnight. It happens through small, consistent actions repeated daily. Science confirms what experience eventually teaches. The human mind is designed to recover, adapt, and grow stronger over time. Sometimes, all it needs is patience, understanding, and the courage to take one small step forward each day. And often, those small steps quietly lead to a new beginning long before we realize healing has already started. Rebuilding life one small step at a time. Rebuilding my life in the United States did not begin with a dramatic breakthrough or a perfect plan. It started with small decisions repeated daily, often unnoticed, sometimes frustratingly slow. After learning how stress and healing worked through science and personal experience, the next challenge was practical. How do you actually rebuild a stable life after feeling emotionally and mentally exhausted? The answer, I discovered, was surprisingly simple but difficult to practice. Small consistent actions matter more than big temporary efforts. For a long time, I believed success required sudden transformation. A better job, perfect finances, or complete emotional confidence. But reality moved differently. Real progress happened in tiny improvements that accumulated over months. The first area I focused on was daily routine. During my hardest years, every day felt chaotic. Sleep schedules changed constantly. Meals were irregular. Work consumed all my energy. Free time disappeared into worry and social media scrolling. Psychologists explain that routine creates a sense of control, especially when external situations feel uncertain. So I started rebuilding structure. I began waking up at nearly the same time every day, even on weekends. Morning routines included simple habits: stretching, drinking water, and planning tasks for the day. These actions felt small, yet they stabilized my mood more than expected. Productivity research shows that completing small tasks early increases motivation throughout the day. Each finished task sends a signal of accomplishment to the brain, building momentum. Work life also required adjustment. Instead of trying to prove myself constantly, I focused on improving skills step by step. Communication with colleagues improved when I stopped fearing mistakes and began asking questions openly. Immigrants often feel pressure to perform perfectly, fearing judgment. But experience taught me something different. People respect effort and honesty more than perfection. Career stability didn't appear overnight. I took online courses, practiced professional English, and learned industry skills gradually. Sometimes progress felt invisible, but over time, opportunities expanded. Financial rebuilding followed a similar pattern. Early years in America drained savings due to relocation costs, unexpected expenses, and unstable employment. Stress about money affected every decision. Financial experts recommend creating small emergency savings first rather than chasing large investments immediately. Following this advice, I began saving modest amounts each month. Even small savings created emotional relief. Knowing that unexpected expenses wouldn't immediately cause crisis changed how secure life felt. Relationships also needed rebuilding. Immigration pressure and cultural differences had created emotional distance between my partner and me. Instead of waiting for problems to disappear, we intentionally worked on communication. Weekly conversations became routine. We discussed frustrations calmly instead of arguing impulsively. Counseling resources and relationship books helped us understand cultural misunderstandings rather than blaming each other. Gradually, partnership felt supportive again rather than stressful. Personal identity rebuilding proved equally important. For years, I felt caught between two worlds, no longer fully belonging to my home country, yet not completely American either. Many immigrants experience this identity conflict. Psychologists call it cultural adaptation stress. Healing required accepting both identities rather than choosing one. I began reconnecting with my cultural roots through cooking traditional food, speaking my native language with friends, and celebrating familiar holidays. At the same time, I embraced American customs and social experiences. Instead of feeling divided, life slowly felt enriched by both cultures. Mental health habits remained essential during rebuilding. Exercise routines became more consistent. Weekend outdoor activities replaced long hours indoors. Fresh air and physical movement improved emotional stability more than expected. Mindfulness practices also continued. Brief moments of reflection helped reduce emotional reactions to daily frustrations. Problems still appeared, but reactions became calmer. Social life, once neglected, returned slowly. Building friendships as an adult immigrant is challenging, but community connections are vital. Joining hobby groups, professional events, and local gatherings expanded my network. Not every interaction led to friendship, yet each conversation reduced feelings of isolation. Perhaps the most important lesson during rebuilding involved patience. Modern culture promotes quick success stories, but real life often unfolds slowly. Comparing progress to others only created unnecessary pressure. Research in behavioral psychology confirms that sustainable change happens gradually. People who focus on steady improvement rather than dramatic transformation maintain progress longer. Looking back now, rebuilding life was less about achieving milestones and more about daily discipline. Showing up even when motivation disappeared. Continuing routines even during discouraging periods. And slowly, life felt stable again. Work stress became manageable. Relationships improved. Emotional health strengthened. Financial security grew. None of these changes happened instantly, yet together they transformed daily life. For anyone currently trying to rebuild after emotional exhaustion, immigration challenges, or personal setbacks, remember this. Progress rarely feels impressive in the moment. But small consistent actions quietly shape the future. A year later, you may look back and realize how much has changed without dramatic events, just steady effort. Because rebuilding life doesn't require perfection. It only requires continuing forward, step by step, even on days when progress feels invisible. And sometimes, the strongest lives are rebuilt not through sudden success, but through quiet determination repeated every single day. Finding home between two worlds. Standing in an airport years ago, holding a one-way ticket to the United States, I thought home was a place you leave behind and later return to. What I didn't understand then was that immigration slowly changes your definition of home. By the 11th chapter of my journey, the biggest emotional challenge was no longer weather, work, or language, it was figuring out where I truly belonged. After rebuilding stability, improving mental health, and repairing relationships, a strange feeling remained. Life in America was working. Career opportunities were growing. My relationship felt stronger. Daily routines felt normal. Yet when people asked, "Where is home?" the answer still felt complicated. Psychologists studying immigration describe this stage as identity integration. Immigrants often experience emotional tension between their birthplace and their new country. You feel attached to both, yet fully part of neither. When visiting my home country after several years in the U.S., excitement quickly mixed with confusion. Friends noticed changes in me. My habits were different. My perspectives had shifted. Conversations sometimes felt disconnected. At the same time, returning to America also brought adjustment challenges. I missed familiar foods, family gatherings, and cultural humor from home. For a while, this emotional conflict felt like failure. I wondered whether moving abroad meant losing part of myself permanently. Research in cross-cultural psychology shows that immigrants who successfully adapt don't erase their original identity. Instead, they develop what scientists call bicultural competence, the ability to move comfortably between cultures. Understanding this concept changed my perspective. Instead of choosing between identities, I started embracing both. Daily life slowly reflected this balance. At home, traditional meals shared space with American recipes. Music playlists mixed languages. Holidays included celebrations from both cultures. This blending didn't dilute identity, it enriched it. Family relationships also evolved. Earlier, distance created guilt. Missing birthdays, weddings, and family emergencies was painful. Technology helped through video calls, but emotional gaps remained. Over time, communication improved as expectations adjusted. Family members began understanding the realities of immigrant life. I learned to express love differently, through regular calls, support, and intentional visits rather than physical presence alone. Sociologists studying immigrant families note that emotional bonds adapt over distance when communication becomes intentional instead of automatic. Another surprising realization appeared through friendships. Early in America, I tried to connect only with people from my own cultural background for comfort. Later, friendships expanded across cultures. Conversations with people from different countries revealed shared experiences, homesickness, adaptation struggles, cultural confusion. Immigration stories sounded similar regardless of origin. These connections created a new sense of belonging, not tied to geography but to shared experience. Career identity also evolved. At first, professional success felt like survival, earning enough, keeping employment, managing immigration requirements. Later, work became about purpose and contribution. Mentoring new immigrants entering my workplace brought unexpected satisfaction. Helping them navigate cultural misunderstandings or workplace expectations felt meaningful. Psychologists explain that helping others strengthens personal identity and emotional well-being. Teaching what you once struggled to learn reinforces your own growth. Relationships at home deepened too. My partner and I eventually understood that building a life across cultures required flexibility. Traditions merged rather than competed. Family expectations adjusted gradually. Marriage, once stressed by adaptation challenges, became stronger because both of us learned patience and empathy. Another emotional shift involved gratitude. Earlier, I focused on what immigration took away: familiarity, comfort, proximity to loved ones. Now I noticed what it added: resilience, independence, broader perspective. Travel between countries no longer felt like leaving one life behind, but moving between chapters of the same story. And slowly, the question of belonging lost its urgency. Home stopped being a single location. It became people, routines, memories, and personal growth accumulated across places. Research in identity psychology confirms that people with multicultural experiences often develop greater adaptability, creativity, and empathy because they learn to navigate complexity. Looking back, discomfort initially felt like loss. Later, it revealed itself as expansion. The version of me who first arrived in America searched desperately for certainty, clear answers about success, identity, and belonging. The current version understands that uncertainty is part of growth. Sometimes belonging means accepting that you belong to more than one place. So if you're navigating life between cultures, feeling uncertain where you fit, remember this: confusion doesn't mean failure. It means your world has expanded beyond simple definitions. You don't have to choose one identity over another. You are allowed to carry multiple homes in your heart. And perhaps real belonging isn't about geography at all. Maybe it's about becoming comfortable with who you've become through every challenge, every adaptation, every uncomfortable lesson along the way. Because in the end, home might simply be the place where your past struggles and present strength finally learn to live together peacefully. A warmer life than before. Years after stepping onto American soil with fear, confusion, and hope mixed together, I sometimes laugh at how certain I was that happiness depended on comfort. I believed warm weather, familiar food, familiar language, and predictable routines created a good life. Yet the final lesson of this journey surprised me: the cold, the struggle, the misunderstandings, and the uncomfortable growth were exactly what shaped a life warmer than the one I left behind. The ending of this story is not dramatic. No lottery win, no sudden fame, no perfect Hollywood success. Instead, it is something quieter and more powerful: a stable, meaningful life built slowly through challenge, healing, and persistence. My career eventually found direction. Years of uncertain jobs and immigration anxiety slowly transformed into professional confidence. I no longer worked just to survive, I worked with purpose. Skills developed through struggle became strengths others respected. Studies in career psychology show that people who overcome early professional hardship often develop stronger adaptability and long-term job satisfaction because they learn to handle change better than those who experience smooth beginnings. At home, life also softened. My partner and I, once strained by cultural differences and survival stress, learned how to support each other through honest communication. Love matured beyond romance into partnership. Marriage in a foreign country requires teamwork. Immigration paperwork, financial planning, and cultural expectations test relationships deeply. But overcoming those challenges together created stronger trust. Family relationships improved too. Distance no longer felt like loss but transformation. Video calls became part of weekly routines. Visits home felt meaningful instead of guilty. My family saw growth instead of absence. And perhaps most importantly, I learned to feel proud instead of confused about my identity. Earlier, I wondered where I truly belonged. Now, I understand that belonging can exist in multiple places. My roots remain in my birthplace, but my branches grew in America. Sociologists note that immigrants who successfully integrate often develop a hybrid identity, allowing them to navigate multiple cultures with ease. This identity becomes an advantage, not a conflict. My daily life today reflects that blend. Work meetings happen in English. Dinner conversations switch languages. Cultural traditions mix naturally. I celebrate holidays from both worlds without choosing between them. And something unexpected happened along the way. The hardships that once hurt became stories that help others. New immigrants sometimes reach out, sharing fear, loneliness, or doubts about staying in America. Listening to them feels like hearing my own past voice. When I tell them that confusion and discomfort are normal, I'm not offering motivational slogans. I'm sharing survival experience. Psychologists studying resilience confirm that people who overcome major life transitions often develop empathy and emotional strength that benefit others. In other words, healing yourself often prepares you to help someone else heal. Looking back, the person who arrived in the U.S. years ago wanted certainty. They wanted guarantees. They wanted success without struggle. The person speaking now understands something simpler and deeper. Growth rarely feels comfortable while it's happening. Winter taught patience. Loneliness taught independence. Career setbacks taught persistence. Cultural misunderstandings taught empathy. Relationship challenges taught communication. Every uncomfortable moment carried hidden lessons. And happiness, it turns out, didn't arrive when life became easy. It appeared when I became stronger. One quiet evening recently, walking home after work under cold winter air, I noticed something unexpected. Snow fell gently, covering streets in silence. Instead of feeling miserable like during my first winter, I felt peaceful. Cold air no longer symbolized suffering. It reminded me how far I had come. Researchers studying happiness note that long-term life satisfaction comes less from comfort and more from personal growth, meaningful relationships, and overcoming adversity. That realization felt like closing a circle. Life in America did not replace my old life. It expanded it. The warm country I left gave me roots. The cold life I entered gave me strength. And together, they built a future I couldn't have imagined back then. So if you're watching this while feeling lost in a new country, a new job, or a difficult life chapter, remember this. Discomfort is not the end of your story. Sometimes discomfort is the teacher preparing you for a life you can't yet see. And healing begins when you stop fighting change and start learning from it. Because one day, you might stand where I stand now, realizing that the hardest journey of your life quietly built the strongest version of you. And you'll smile, understanding that what once felt cold eventually made your world warmer than before. Life doesn't always become easier. But you become braver. And often, that makes all the difference. Before you leave, remember this. The life you're struggling with today might secretly be preparing you for the life you've been dreaming about. Every cold season, every lonely night, every cultural misunderstanding, every moment you almost gave up, none of it is wasted. Growth often hides inside discomfort, and healing begins the moment you decide not to quit on yourself. If this story felt like your own journey, then you're not alone. And this channel is where we keep talking honestly about life in the United States, immigration struggles, cultural adaptation, relationships, mental healing, and personal growth, real stories, real lessons, real hope for anyone trying to build a better life far from home. In our next videos, we'll explore untold immigrant experiences, emotional survival tips, career rebuilding stories, and the small habits that quietly transform lives in America. Some stories may surprise you. Some may feel uncomfortably familiar. And some might be exactly what you need to hear at the right moment. So if you're rebuilding your life, chasing opportunity in the U.S., healing after disappointment, or simply trying to become stronger than yesterday, this channel is made for you. Subscribe now, share this video with someone who needs encouragement today, and join a community that believes struggles can become strength. Because sometimes, the journey that nearly breaks you is the one that finally shows you who you really are. And your best chapter might just be starting now.